Well, we have senior legal analyst at the Heritage Foundation and the director of election reform at Heritage Action, Hans von Spakovsky. We'll talk about religious liberty, and we will also be discussing, well, this. Jesse Jackson is looking at corporate boards and saying, you know what? You don't have enough people of color on your board. And he just says there's just not enough. Roll it.
In the kind of going backwards. I mean, you think companies like eBay and Yahoo and Google and Apple have no person of color on their board. That's shameless, it seems to me. Not long ago, Verizon did a $50 billion debt offering, $300 million in fees. No black, no Latino, no woman got a dime. 1% would have been $2.8 million. Apple did a major, by the way, they have none on their board as well. They did a debt offering, and the board members got $58 million.
What does this tell you, Reverend?
And if it just 1% would have been $325,000. And so it says that there's not enough pressure on them, and there's not enough volunteer commitment to open up. I think a company like Coca-Cola has such a great reputation, but Coca-Cola has not one black franchise owner. Pepsi-Cola only one franchise owner. I mean,
one franchise owner for Pepsi-Cola?
Zero for Coke. I mean, zero. I mean, so it's a kind of a Wall Street segregation. We've politicized to the votes. We've integrated the political process, but Wall Street's kind of been left off the front burner. We focus every day on politics or some personality who's going to lead us or not lead.
Okay, that's interesting. It's segregation. It's not choices people make, looking for the best talent and understanding that. Remember that I believe his son ended up with a brewery, a distributorship. He gains. Hey, little protest. People don't like it. What do you want? That sounds like hustling, race hustling to me. That said, he does have a part of the law on his side. However ill-defined it is, Maxine Waters understands this. And why does this matter to you? Because what we're talking about is not being judged by the content of our character, not being judged by the merit on merit. We're being judged by somebody from the outside looking to gain for his organization or in the advancement of us people of color. By the way, when anybody speaks for your color, I would reject them outright. Because if anybody speaks for white people in the name of Crane Durham, I reject them. I don't play the idiot squad game. I don't play it when it's the KKK or the Black Panthers or the Westboro Baptist Church. And I don't play it when we have race hustlers directing policy and using extortion tactics, in essence, to gain what they want because they feel they can highlight something that we're all opposed to. And that is discrimination on the basis of race. We want to be equal under the law and be judged on the content of our character. And that's why Hans von Spakovsky, along with Roger Clegg, wrote a piece on just that, a paper on just that, racial preferences and ending them. Hans joins us now. Hans, welcome back.
Thanks, Crane.
Really frustrating. Now here, actually, I want to play this clip only because this is Jesse Jackson talking about the law in Dodd-Frank and using a particular section to advance what he believes would be just. Roll it.
I think if the government were to vigorously enforce affirmative action and vigorously enforce economic EEOC and contract compliance, Maxine Waters pulled out of the Dodd-Frank bill something called Section 242, where the government would have, each agency would have a monitoring over each agency. That it has not happened yet.
Okay.
And so the government itself is not honoring its own principles of inclusion.
So affirmative action, you think, should go to the corporate boardroom?
Oh, to be sure, because when you look at the market, after all, what does the black and brown community represent except money, market, talent, and location? And so there is not And so what it forces us to have to do is, A, to begin to have hearings, talk with Congressman Waters today. It forces us to begin to look at strategies of boycotts again, because we want two-way trade.
Do you think boycotts are coming because of this?
We could very well. We'll want to end a one-way trade. We hope that they would see the good sense. And when you inclusion leads to growth, and that's growth everybody wins.
Let me ask you this, Hans. Are we in Jesse Jackson's world in the sense of racial injustice and the idea that if there's not percentage-wise the amount of people in a population of color, that there's somehow discrimination automatically, and therefore they need to change the policies? We need to have a proportionate number of people of color or not of color, of gender, whatever it may be, along with our population. Look at our census. If not, there's discrimination. Is that where we are in America today?
Unfortunately, we are, and that's the way Jesse Jackson views things. I mean, look, this idea that there's discrimination in the corporate world against black Americans is just foolish. In fact, it's the other way around. He calls it affirmative action. What there are racial preferences. Corporations practice this, universities practice this. They actually discriminate against white employees and in favor of black employees because, for example, in the corporate world, they are so desperate. They are so desperate to get folks into the corporate world, African Americans and others. What Jesse Jackson won't do is he won't concentrate on the problem. And the problem is getting students, black students, to concentrate on doing well in school and getting into all of these professions, whether it's into the legal profession, into the business world. That's the problem.
And what you're addressing in your paper is the idea that a institution or university is going to make a decision and factor in these elements of race and judge people rather on the basis of how they look as opposed to the content of their character. And so you're addressing this in the line of education, among other things. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, but what people need to realize is that one of the reasons there aren't enough black lawyers, aren't enough black doctors, is because of the racial preferences in the university systems. And that's because it causes what's called a mismatch. When they allow students to get in, black students, for example, who have lower credentials than other students in an entering class at a particular university, they are basically guaranteeing those students will fail. They have high fallout rates. They don't graduate at the same rate. They have worse grades. They get frustrated. If those students were getting into schools that they're qualified for, where they're the same as the other students in the class, then their graduation rates would go up.
So bottom line, if they were judged on what they could do as opposed to how they look, they would have more success.
No, that's exactly right. And the data all shows that. There have been a number of studies published recently that have looked at this specific issue, and it shows that the kind of affirmative action he's talking about actually hurts the supposed beneficiaries of it.
Tell me, Hans, why is it in 2014 we're still even having this conversation if the concept was to be judged by the content of one's character? Is it because people are still so afraid of being called or labeled an ist or an ism?
Yeah, that is part of it. I'll tell you, I actually did a debate last week in Michigan with some people, and I can tell you the folks on the other side of this, their belief is that America is an inherently racist society, and that if you don't have these kind of goals and quotas, people won't get hired. I mean, that's just a ridiculous assumption. It doesn't reflect the reality of America, but that apparently is a view of folks who support this kind of what they call affirmative action.
Well, I guess it preys on our instinct of our fallen nature and being in our flesh. The idea, no pun intended in that sense, but the idea is, hey, Hans, if I have a situation and I don't reach the goal at some point in my life of saying this #1 show on radio, whatever it may be, and I'm looking at ratings or whatever it may be, and I'm saying here's the measure and I didn't do it, you know what I'm going to do? my first instinct is to do, I won't do it, I pray I won't do it, is to blame somebody else. To blame somebody else for my station in life. Not to be, it's interesting. The thing about liberty is you accept the fact that your rights come from God. You understand that. You appreciate that. You look at the system and you say, okay, and yeah, there are instances of discrimination, and hey, the lawyers love those, and you can make a lot of money, and sometimes rightfully so if there is actual discrimination. But bottom line, we always look for an excuse. And so if something's built in as an excuse, wow, I will take it. And not only that, if I'm a politician and I know this, oh, I'm going to manipulate. I'm going to play it. Victimology is very easy because it goes to our fallen nature. Do you think that's do you agree or disagree?
Yeah, no, I agree completely. You find that kind of victimology in all the supporters of this kind of discrimination. And look, discrimination is morally wrong.
Amen.
But unfortunately, we're in the situation now that, for example, the federal government discriminates constantly in contracts, in hiring, against certain races and in favor of others. And that's why, for example, this paper we just wrote, Roger Clegg and I, we're recommending that states start working at this. This is a great thing, actually, for the Tea Party organizations all over the country. They want to do something, get a referendum passed in your state that bars racial preferences and any kind of racial discrimination in college admissions, in public contracting, and in public hiring, when the state and local governments hire folks.
I love it. And, of course, ironically, you'll be called racist for doing this. Have you been called racist yet for your paper?
Oh, yeah, I have. But listen.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to laugh. I mean, it's just so absurd. But
it is. You're saying you want to ban all racial discrimination, and for that you're called a racist, which is just crazy.
It is crazy. It's frustrating, and for many of us. But if we're silent about it, if we don't, I mean, you give suggestions, you give a plan, and that's like in Who's Counting. You give a plan. You help us out here. Now, I am literally on the verge of being able to post this. Of course, I'm really good at this, so it'll take me about an hour and a half to actually post it because that's how I am with the Facebook. And people say, why don't you get more up on Facebook? Because I'm a little slow. Again, it's somebody else's fault, not mine. No, it's my fault. Bottom line, Hans, when we look at what we're looking for right now, or looking at right now, some would say America's so divided. We thought with a president being elected, we were a post-racial presidency, post-racial America. Now we have race hustlers on steroids and advising the White House on MSNBC. I mean, they're playing the games more than ever. How do you look at this? Because I look at it and say, hey, you know what? They're louder than ever, and they're moving forward their agenda more than ever. But at least is what even you saw, I believe, in Michigan was at least people are coming out and speaking it and putting it on the table. That way we can confront it in a way that is rational and a way that we can change the hearts and minds. Is that just me looking at it going, oh, half full?
No. In fact, look, Jesse Jackson may be very loud out there, as are a lot of other folks, but the polling on this actually shows that the vast majority of Americans, whites, blacks, and Hispanics, all believe, for example, that you should not consider race in college admissions. So the constituency, folks at the grassroots, do not agree with Jesse Jackson and other kind of race hustlers like him.
Hans, real quick, couple just quick questions. One, Nancy Pelosi says the founders would have loved Obamacare. Would they?
She just, every time she opens her mouth, she really demonstrates her ignorance of the Constitution and the framers and the founding of the country. I mean, that's just a silly claim.
But isn't that exactly what many on the left feel? Hey, right to life in the Declaration. Of course, they kind of get those things confused, the Constitution and Declaration before the Constitution, of course. But bottom line, they're looking at it, and they see these rights. What's wrong with making things right, Hans? Like a right to health care?
They're confusing rights with privileges, and they want to convert privileges into rights, and that's not something that our founders would have contemplated or that we should contemplate today.
Does it inevitably end up doing the exact opposite of what you hope to achieve? For example, when you start taking over a healthcare system and socializing the system through big government, you're actually going to get a much worse product and less people covered and more of a two-tiered system?
Yeah, of course you are. Anybody who doubts that should look at the consequences that have occurred in England, in Canada, or the worst example, of course, the former Soviet Union, if you want to see what that kind of government takeover will cause.
What do you make of the treatment of communism by NBC and the Olympics and the way that they are, at best, soft-selling it in the sense of the way it was and the harsh and the actual what people lived under?
Well, I can't say I'm surprised. I find it shocking, but they clearly don't want to talk about it. They don't want to cover it, and they're helping Putin, who, is trying to change the country back into a dictatorship and unfortunately succeeding in doing that.
It's amazing that they have more hate and criticism for the man who brought greater liberty, certainly arguably, to the Middle East and to women's rights, and George W. Bush, and they are more critical of him with a megaphone than they are of a brutal killer who has journalist blood on his hands, among others. It's amazing to me. I mean, it's really, we're through the looking glass. Up is down, down is up, Hans. Scary stuff.
It's unfortunately very true, Crane.
Hans von Spakovsky, it is great to be with you. I have posted the article. All I have to do is press post, so hopefully it will happen. But I know inevitably I'll get it up there for the Facebook for people to read. Great primer, great way to get involved, and a way to do it, to be judged on the content of your character as opposed to the color of your skin. Thank you, Hans.
Thank you, Crane. Bye-bye.
Take care, buddy.